You can work 80 hours a week and still stay broke. Not because you're lazy, not because the opportunity isn't there, not because the economy is against you or the timing is wrong or the right people haven't noticed you yet. Because the blueprint running underneath all of that effort has a ceiling built into it. And no amount of work breaks a ceiling you don't know exists. Most people think money is won through effort, through strategy, through the right skills applied at the right moment with enough consistency to produce results. And effort matters, strategy matters, skills matter, but none of them are the architect. Your subconscious mind is the invisible architect of your bank account, not your work ethic, not your intelligence, not your network or your timing or your discipline. The image your subconscious holds of who you are and what is financially normal for someone like you, that image is drawing the blueprint. And every decision you make, every opportunity you pursue, every moment you either step forward or pull back, all of it is being built according to that blueprint, whether you know it or not. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. If your self-image has a ceiling, you will sabotage every opportunity that tries to take you above it. Not consciously, not deliberately, not because you want to fail, because the subconscious system experiences financial growth beyond its blueprint as instability, as a threat to coherence, and it will correct with mechanical precision every single time, until you are back inside the boundary it recognizes as yours. You have felt this, the opportunity that arrived and quietly dissolved, the income that grew and then, with no single obvious decision, contracted back to familiar territory. The deal that was almost done and then wasn't. The version of your financial life that almost became real and then didn't quite. You explained those moments. You found the reasons. The market shifted. The timing was off. The other person didn't come through. The circumstances were genuinely complicated. And the explanations were partially true. But the pattern underneath the explanations tells a different story. And the pattern has been telling that story for long enough that it is time to stop fighting the symptoms. It is time to start rewriting the script that controls your financial reality. Not the strategy, not the habits, not the morning routine or the investment approach or the business model. The script, the one running below all of that, the one that was written before you were old enough to question it. The one that has been quietly, efficiently, and repeatedly determining the financial size of your life without your conscious permission. That script is where this starts, and what you're about to find out is not comfortable, but it is the only thing that is actually true. There is a number in your nervous system. You have never written it down. Nobody told it to you directly. You did not consciously choose it, but it is there, precise, embedded, running continuously in the background of every financial decision you have ever made. It is the number your subconscious believes is normal for you. Not maximum, not a ceiling in the way a ceiling is something you can see and consciously push against, a set point, the financial temperature your system is calibrated to maintain, the number it treats as home. And your system, like every system designed around homeostasis, does not experience deviation from home as progress. It experiences it as instability. And it responds to instability the way all self-regulating systems respond. It corrects. If your income drops significantly below the set point, the system produces urgency, drive, the specific hunger that comes from falling behind what feels normal. And that urgency generates action that usually returns the number to familiar territory. If your income rises significantly above the set point, the system produces something else, something quieter, less obvious, a series of small corrections that most people never identify as corrections, a spending pattern that expands to absorb the excess, a business decision that introduces unnecessary risk, a withdrawal from the opportunity at exactly the moment it requires full commitment, a subconscious arrangement of circumstances that returns the number over time back to home. And you find the reasons. Because there are always reasons. The system does not correct without generating cover. It does not sabotage without producing a logical explanation for what happened. And the logical explanation is usually good enough to accept, good enough to file as circumstance rather than pattern, good enough to move past without examining what is actually underneath. This is the enemy. Not a person, not the market, not your background or your education, or any of the external variables you have spent years analyzing. The set point, the invisible financial thermostat that was calibrated in an environment you did not choose, by experiences you did not design, through repeated exposure to a definition of financial normal that belonged to someone else's life. And you have been living inside that definition for so long that it does not feel like someone else's. It feels like yours. It feels like the honest, realistic, experienced assessment of what is financially available to someone with your specific history, your specific circumstances, your specific level of readiness. It is not your assessment. It is the blueprint's assessment, and the blueprint was drawn by your past, not your future, not your actual capacity, not the honest accounting of what you are capable of building. Your past, which is the one thing in your entire situation that cannot be changed, and you have been letting the unchangeable thing determine the changeable ones. Here is what makes this enemy so nearly impossible to fight without understanding it first. The blueprint does not feel like a blueprint. It feels like you. It feels like your personality, your relationship with money, your natural tendencies, your honest self-knowledge. When you feel uncomfortable holding a large financial goal, that discomfort feels like wisdom, like the appropriate caution of someone who has learned not to overextend, like self-awareness. It is the blueprint maintaining its boundary. When you feel the pull toward a smaller, safer financial target, that pull feels like maturity, like the responsible adjustment of someone who understands their actual situation. It is the thermostat correcting. When you find the reason to exit an opportunity that was moving you above the set point, the reason feels like judgment, like the considered decision of someone who weighs options carefully. It is the system generating cover for a correction it was already making. And you trust all of it, because all of it sounds like you, because all of it uses your voice and your logic and your actual experience as its evidence. The blueprint is not a foreign voice. It is fluent in you, which is why the people who never examine it never escape it. They spend their entire lives making decisions that feel like their own, that are actually the architecture running them. You know the feeling. The month where everything clicks, the deals close, the numbers move. The version of your financial life that you have been building toward starts to feel not hypothetical but actual, reachable, almost real. And something shifts. Not a decision, not a moment you can point to and say that is where it changed. Something atmospheric. The quality of your engagement with the work changes slightly. The appetite for the next step becomes slightly less sharp. The energy that was behind everything starts to feel slightly more distributed, slightly less directed. And then the month ends, and the numbers are back in familiar territory, and you do the accounting and find the reasons and accept the verdict and start the next cycle with renewed intention. And the renewed intention is real. It is completely real every time. But the renewed intention is being held by the same blueprint. And the same blueprint will produce the same correction at the same point, with different reasons, in a slightly different costume. This is the loop you have been inside, and the loop has a specific emotional texture you know in your body, even if you have never named it this precisely. It starts with genuine momentum, not manufactured. Real momentum produced by real effort and real decisions that create real results. And for a window, the momentum feels like proof, like evidence that this time is structurally different from the previous times. Then the set point appears, not as a wall, as a fog, a slight thickening of the resistance, a slight increase in the complexity of the next step, a slight decrease in the clarity that was driving the action. and you respond to the fog the way intelligent, self-aware people respond to fog. You slow down slightly to get your bearings. You think more carefully about the direction. You spend time analyzing the next move so that when you make it with precision rather than momentum. And in the slowing, the momentum dissipates. And in the analysis, the action is replaced by preparation. And in the preparation, the financial position quietly returns to its set point. And then the fog lifts, and you are back in familiar territory, and the clarity returns, and the cycle begins again. You have not been failing, you have been correcting, on schedule, with precision, according to a blueprint you did not write. And the most painful part of this loop is not the correction itself. The correction is almost comfortable in a specific and shameful way. The return to familiar ground feels under the frustration like relief, like coming home, like the specific ease of circumstances that match the internal model. The most painful part is what happens in the moments before the correction. The moments where the numbers were right and the momentum was real and something in you did not feel the ease that should have been there. Felt instead a specific, sourceless discomfort. The discomfort of being somewhere unfamiliar while everyone around you seemed to be comfortable there. That discomfort is the set point registering the deviation. That discomfort is the thermostat preparing to correct, and you interpreted it as a signal that something was wrong with the opportunity, or the approach, or your readiness, when it was a signal that something was right, that you were exactly where growth requires you to be, and you left, because the blueprint told you to, in the language of discomfort, and you listened because you did not know it was the blueprint speaking. Let's be precise about every solution that has been handed to you and why each one fails at the specific moment it matters. Financial education. Learn how money works. Understand investing. Master the principles of wealth accumulation. The knowledge will produce the behavior. The knowledge is real. The principles are sound. And people who apply them do build wealth. But here is what financial education cannot do. It cannot change the set point. You can know exactly how compound interest works and still find ways not to let your money compound beyond the familiar number. You can understand leverage completely and still make the specific decision that removes it at the moment it would take you above the blueprint ceiling. You can know every wealth-building principle Hill or anyone else ever documented and still produce, through 100 small decisions that each seem reasonable, the financial outcome that matches the old blueprint, because knowledge is processed by the conscious mind. The set point lives in the subconscious, and the subconscious does not update from information, it updates from experience, and it filters experience through the existing blueprint. New information goes in, the blueprint interprets it, relevant parts are absorbed. Parts that would require the blueprint to update its ceiling are quietly reclassified as not quite applicable to your specific situation. You have done this, specifically and personally. You have read the book and understood it and found the way it didn't quite apply to where you currently are. That is not a failure of intellect. That is the blueprint doing its job. Hustle. Work more. Work harder. Work longer. The income is a direct function of the effort. More input, more output. And this approach produces results. In the short term, often in the medium term, the income rises with the effort. And then the blueprint corrects, not the effort, the income. The effort can stay high. The income finds its way back to the set point through expenses that expand, through decisions that introduce costs, through the quiet arrangement of circumstances that returns the financial position to the familiar number while the effort continues at full intensity. You can work 80 hours a week and stay broke. This is not a metaphor. It is the mechanical description of a high-effort life operating under a low-ceiling blueprint. The effort is real. The blueprint overrides it. Every time. As long as the blueprint holds. Mindset content. Consume the videos, read the books, absorb the philosophy. Let the repeated exposure to wealth consciousness gradually shift the internal landscape. And the consumption feels like progress, because the ideas are good, because the philosophy is sound, because understanding the mechanism of the blueprint at the intellectual level produces a genuine and measurable shift in how you think about money. At the surface level, the structural level does not update from consumption. It updates from the process Hill described in detail, and that the consumption-based approach to mindset work entirely replaces with a more comfortable alternative. Because understanding is comfortable, applying is not, and the comfortable version of the work produces the comfortable version of the result, which is slightly more sophisticated thinking about the same financial life. The blueprint holds. Because understanding the blueprint is not the same as replacing it, and every solution that stops at understanding stops short of the only place the actual change can happen. Hill spent years trying to answer one question that his contemporaries were not asking. Not how do wealthy people behave, not what strategies do they use, not what do they know that others don't. His question was this: what do they believe about themselves in relation to money at the level below conscious thought? Because he had observed something that the behavior-focused approaches could not explain. People who knew everything about wealth building and still didn't build it. People who had access to every resource and still returned to financial mediocrity. People who achieved significant wealth and then, with a regularity that was almost clinical, found ways to return to their previous financial position. And people who had almost nothing, no education, no connections, no apparent advantages, who built wealth and held it and continued growing it past every point where others had stopped. The difference was not in the external variables. Hill had eliminated those one by one through decades of observation. The difference was internal. Specifically, it was the image each person held of themselves as a financial entity. What they believed at the operational level was normal for them. What they expected below conscious thought their financial life to look like. The people who built and held wealth had a subconscious blueprint that was calibrated for wealth, not as an aspiration, as a normal, as the expected state of things, as home. And the people who cycled, who achieved and corrected, who grew and retreated, who worked enormously hard and produced results that didn't match the effort, had blueprints calibrated for something smaller. Not because they were smaller people, because the blueprint was built in a smaller environment. Hill called the process of changing this blueprint mental transformation, not mindset shift, not attitude adjustment, not the adoption of new beliefs at the surface level. Transformation at the structural level of the image the subconscious holds of who you are as a financial being. And the transformation requires something that no strategy, no education, no amount of hustle can replace. It requires the deliberate, consistent, emotionally engaged process of building a new normal inside the subconscious before the external evidence of that normal exists. Not pretending the evidence exists, not performing wealth consciousness, not affirmations without mechanism. The specific process of introducing the new blueprint to the system through the channels the system actually updates from. And those channels are not intellectual, they are emotional, they are experiential. They are the channels that were used to build the original blueprint. The same channels can be used to build a new one. This is the shift. Not a new strategy on top of the old blueprint. A new blueprint underneath everything. Tell me in the comments. What is your number? Not your goal number. The number your subconscious treats as normal. The one your financial life keeps returning to. Name it honestly. Even if just to yourself in the comments. The naming is the beginning of the seeing. The first principle is what Hill called the reconstruction of the financial self-image. And it begins with one specific act that most people are not willing to perform. Honest inventory. Not of your financial situation, of your financial beliefs, the ones running below the surface, the ones that feel like facts rather than beliefs because they have been present so long they have lost their contingency. Beliefs like, people like me don't hold that kind of money, or wealth at that level is for people with different backgrounds, different connections, different starting points, or I can earn well, but I'm not good with money, or more money creates more problems, or wanting that much is greedy. These are not facts. They are encoded experiences, repeated inputs that became structural beliefs that became the blueprint. And the inventory requires naming them, specifically, in plain language, without the sophisticated framing that makes them sound like wisdom. Because a belief named plainly can be examined. A belief dressed as wisdom cannot. The examination asks one question of each belief. Where did this come from? Not in general, specifically. Whose voice originally said this? In what environment was this first true? At what age did you absorb this as fact rather than perspective? Because every belief in the blueprint has a source. And a source that is not you, that is someone else's experience encoded in your system without your conscious consent, is a source that can be challenged. You did not choose these beliefs. They were installed by your environment before you had the tools to filter them. You can choose different ones, but only after you see the installed ones clearly enough to identify them as installed rather than innate. The mental shift is this. Your relationship with money is not your personality. It is your programming. And programming, unlike personality, can be rewritten, but only after it has been read accurately. The second principle is what Hill called the new normal practice, and it is the operational heart of blueprint change. The subconscious updates its definition of normal through repeated exposure to new experience at the emotional level, not through repeated statements about new experience, through actual, embodied, emotionally engaged contact with the new normal. This is what makes the practice specific and demanding. It cannot be done intellectually. It requires the engagement of the emotional system, the same system that encoded the original blueprint. The practice works like this. You identify the specific financial level that represents the new blueprint, not a goal in the distant future, the next level, the level just above the current set point, specific enough to be real, close enough to be immutable. And you spend time daily, consistently, with genuine emotional engagement, inhabiting that level internally before it exists externally, not visualizing the possessions of that level, inhabiting the identity of the person who lives at that level financially, how they make decisions, how they respond to opportunities, how they hold money when it arrives, how they think about expenses, how they relate to financial risk, how they feel specifically in the body when the number on the screen reflects the new normal. The emotional engagement is not performed, it is accessed through specificity. The more specific the image, the more genuine the emotional response. The more genuine the emotional response, the deeper the encoding. The deeper the encoding, the faster the blueprint updates. This is not visualization in the generic sense. It is identity rehearsal at the emotional level, using the brain's own encoding mechanism to install a new normal before the external evidence of it exists. What this feels like in real life when it is working is a gradual shift in the discomfort threshold. The number that previously felt like instability starts to feel slightly more like home. The opportunity that previously triggered the correction response starts to feel slightly more like it belongs to you. The decision that previously felt presumptuous starts to feel slightly more like the obvious choice. Slightly, then more than slightly, then normal. The thermostat is being recalibrated, not forced, recalibrated. Through the process, it was originally calibrated by repeated emotional experience of a new normal. The mental shift is this. You are not trying to achieve the new financial level. You are trying to make it normal before you achieve it. because achievement follows normalization. The level you achieve is the level your subconscious treats as expected. Make it expected first. The third principle is the one Hill called the elimination of financial counterintention. Counterintention is the simultaneous holding of I want more money, and money is dangerous or complicated or corrupting or the thing that ruins people or the thing that separates you from the people you love. These pairs run simultaneously, below conscious awareness in most cases, and they produce a specific and identifiable result. One step forward, one step back. Consistent net movement of approximately zero. Because both intentions are real, both are operational, both are generating behavior simultaneously, and the behavior generated by the two intentions cancels itself out over time. The counterintention around money is almost universal. It was installed by the same environment that installed the set point. It came from watching what money did to people, or watching what the absence of money did to people, or absorbing the specific moral framework your environment held around wealth, that wanting too much was dangerous, that people with money were different in ways that meant distance, that the pursuit of wealth required compromises of character. These frameworks did not arrive as stated beliefs, they arrived as atmospheric conclusions, the accumulated sense of the environment you grew up in, and they became structural, woven into the blueprint alongside the set point, and they work against every conscious intention to build wealth with the same efficiency as the set point itself, because they are not less real for being unconscious. They are more powerful because they operate without resistance from the conscious mind. The elimination Hill described is not the removal of the concern. The concern may be partially valid. Wealth does change relationships. Wealth does create new complexities. Wealth does require the navigation of things that financial scarcity does not require. The elimination is of the equation that treats these complexities as reasons to avoid wealth rather than realities to be navigated skillfully. The mental shift is this: identify the specific negative association your subconscious has attached to wealth at your next level, not in general terms, in specific ones. What exactly does the part of you that resists wealth believe would be lost or damaged or threatened by holding more money than you currently hold? Name it. Examine whether the threat is real or inherited, and if real, determine what skillful navigation of it looks like. Not avoidance, navigation. The fourth principle is what Hill called the faith mechanism in the context of financial reality. Not faith as religious belief, not faith as optimism, faith as the operational decision to behave as if the new blueprint is already true before the external evidence confirms it. This principle is where most people collapse, because it requires the most from the moment where the least is available. The moment where the new behavior is required is always the moment where the old blueprint is loudest. The moment where the financial decision matches the new normal but conflicts with the set point. Where the investment is right but the number is above what feels comfortable. Where the commitment is aligned with the new blueprint but the subconscious is generating every available reason to retreat. And faith, as Hill used it, is the practice of making the aligned decision at that moment. Without the emotional confirmation the old blueprint provided for decisions that matched its ceiling. Without the feeling of rightness that familiar financial territory produces. Making the decision anyway, from the new blueprint, before it feels like home. This is not recklessness. The decision must be aligned with genuine strategy and genuine capacity. Faith is not the bypassing of intelligence. It is the willingness to act from the new identity before the new identity feels natural. And the act produces data, real data, encoded at the structural level, evidence that the new normal is operational, that the new blueprint is producing real decisions with real consequences in the real world. And that data begins the update cycle from the inside out, not because the result was perfect, because the decision was made from the new blueprint rather than the old one. Each such decision is a vote for the new thermostat setting, for the new normal, for the financial identity that is being built through the act of inhabiting it before it is confirmed. The fifth principle is the one Hill described as the integration of wealth identity with overall identity. This is the principle that makes all the others sustainable, because it is possible to do all the previous work and still experience the new financial identity as a role being performed rather than a self being inhabited. And a role, no matter how well performed, is not stable. It exhausts eventually. It breaks under pressure. It returns to the self underneath when the performance can no longer be maintained. The integration Hill described is the process of making the new financial identity continuous with the rest of your identity, not a separate wealth persona, not a different version of you that shows up for financial decisions. You, with a financial self-image that has been updated to match your actual capacity. This integration happens through the accumulation of evidence that the new financial identity is consistent with your values, your character, your relationships, your purpose. Because the original blueprint was installed in the context of a complete life. It was not just a financial setting. It was a financial setting that felt appropriate to everything else you understood yourself to be. And the new blueprint must also feel appropriate to everything else you understand yourself to be, or the system will experience it as a foreign element, and foreign elements are rejected. The work here is connecting the new financial normal to the actual reasons it matters to you, not abstract reasons, not the things you think you should want wealth for. The specific, personal, human reasons that are connected to what you actually value, the people you can take care of, the work you can fund, the freedom that becomes possible, the specific version of your daily life that becomes available. When the new financial blueprint is connected to the deep reasons, the system does not experience it as an external goal being forced onto an unwilling identity. It experiences it as an expression of who you are, as the financial reality that is consistent with the person you actually are. And a financial reality that is consistent with who you are does not need to be forced, does not need to be maintained through discipline, does not need to be protected against the subconscious. It is simply what you build, because it is simply who you are. The old blueprint is reading everything in this video, not you, the blueprint, filtering every principle through the question of whether it represents a genuine threat to the set point, deciding which ideas can be accepted as interesting content and which ones need to be neutralized before they become actual change. And the neutralization will not feel like rejection. It will feel like reasoned engagement. It will produce thoughts like, this is true for some people, but my situation is more complex. Or, I understand the principle, but the practical application in my specific circumstances is less straightforward. Or, I agree with this conceptually, and I'll think about how to implement it when things settle down a little. All of these thoughts are the blueprint generating cover, because the blueprint has survived every previous encounter with ideas like these. It has a record of converting insight into content, of allowing understanding without allowing change. And it is preparing to do it again. The only thing that has ever broken that pattern is not better ideas, not more convincing arguments, not deeper intellectual understanding of the mechanism. It is the decision to act before the blueprint is ready to support the action. One specific financial decision made today from the new blueprint in an area where the old set point has been running the response automatically. Not a large decision necessarily. The system does not require large gestures to begin updating. It requires real ones. Decisions with actual financial stakes. Decisions that cost something. Decisions that the old blueprint would not have made and that the new one requires. That decision, made once, is worth more than this entire video. Not because of the external financial consequence of the decision, because of the internal consequence, the data point delivered to the structural level, The evidence that the new blueprint is operational, that it is producing real behavior in the real world. That evidence is what the system updates from. Everything else is preparation for that decision. The preparation is complete. You started this as someone who works hard and wonders why the financial result doesn't match the effort. You now know why. Not as a concept, as a precise mechanical understanding of the system that has been setting your financial ceiling without your conscious knowledge or consent. That system was not built by you. It was built for you. From an environment that had its own financial limitations, its own set point, its own ceiling that felt like the natural order of things because everyone inside it was also inside it. And you have been living under that ceiling, producing results consistent with that blueprint, working hard inside boundaries drawn by someone else's financial normal. The ceiling is not real. It is a set point, and set points change, not through wishing, through the specific process of reconditioning the subconscious through the channels it actually updates from. Emotional experience, consistent exposure to the new normal. Real decisions made from the new blueprint before it feels like home. The gradual accumulation of evidence that a different financial reality belongs to you. This process is available to you, not someday. Starting from the decision you make in the next 24 hours. The decision that says the old set point is no longer the definition of your financial normal. The decision that begins the recalibration. The decision that is not a goal or a plan or an intention. A declaration to the subconscious system in the language it actually understands. Behavior that matches the new blueprint before the new blueprint feels true. The old blueprint will resist, that is certain. The resistance will feel like wisdom, that is guaranteed. The first decision will be uncomfortable in a specific and identifiable way. That discomfort is the thermostat registering the change. It is not a warning, it is a signal. The signal that the recalibration has begun. You have spent long enough building someone else's financial normal. Build yours. If you are ready to name the new set point and commit to the first decision from the new blueprint, put it in the comments. The number, the decision, one sentence, not a goal, a declaration. And if this is the level your financial thinking has been waiting to reach, you already know what to do.